Today's big question is volcano actually wrong? You might be surprised to learn that it is. And while we're at it, let's look at some other possible candidates for words that are commonly misspelled or mispronounced in English. If you've ever been a contestant on a game show like Lingo or Lingo, you'll know that words that end in O, like volcano and hero and zero and piano, these are all common trip-ups for even the most word-savvy contestants. Why is that? Well, we can look to Noah Webster for an explanation. He was an American lexicographer who's considered to be the father of American English. And in 1824, he published the American Dictionary of the English Language. Webster's dictionary helped establish many of the spellings and pronunciations that are common in the United States today, including those weird silent es at the end of words like honor and honesty. But Webster also made a lot of controversial choices about which variant spellings and pronunciations should take priority. For example, he settled on the American English spelling of color as opposed to the British English spelling of color. And he chose to include the U in honor because he felt that it more accurately reflected the word's origin, whereas the English spelling was an Americanism, so to speak. So back to volcano. According to Webster, the O at the end of the word is a bit of an interloper, having insinuated its way into common usage despite the word's Italian origins. In fact, Webster decided that the proper pronunciation was Volcano, just as in the German word Volk, meaning people. Now, since Webster's time, volcano has made its way onto dictionaries published both in the United Kingdom and in the United States, and the pronunciation volcano is listed as one of several alternate pronunciations. But if you're watching this video from the UK, you probably pronounce it volcano and feel no need to include an O that isn't there. And your instinct is right. Volcano is actually one of those rare cases where the British English spelling is the one that reflects the word's origin. Italian loanwords that begin with vol are almost always pronounced vol, as in both volcano and volunteer. Even loanwords that begin with vol like Vulcan and vulnerable tend to start with vol rather than val. There are exceptions, of course. If you happen to be watching this video from Louisiana or another state with the high concentration of Cajun French speakers, you might say volcano because the word entered the French language via Spanish as volcana. Or you could say volcano because of the influence of the Latin word vulcanus, which was the name of a blacksmith god. And finally, you could even say volcano because that's how the Spanish and Portuguese versions of the word are spelled. The reason why this particular loanword has generated so much confusion is simple. Noah Webster. When it comes to names, it seems that history often rhymes. Like volcano in the United States. My last name, Holland, is also commonly mispronounced. In fact, if you're not Dutch, you probably can't pronounce it. It's Holland, as in both Holland and Holland. My surname originated as a habitational name, which means it comes from a place. In this case, the village of Holland in County Down, Northern Ireland. The village itself takes its name from the Irish phrase, "an Cian Phobal," which literally means, the old people. So why is the name spelled Holland? Well, as with many things that were lost in the pond in the United States, the answer is usually the same: Scotland. In the early 1600s, Scottish settlers brought their name to New England, and they anglicized the spelling to make it easier to fit in. They did this by dropping the D and adding an H, resulting in the anglicized form of the name, Holland. Meanwhile, across the pond, the spelling remained closer to the original Gaelic, becoming simply O'Holland before eventually being anglicized to O'Halloran. Today, it's one of those surnames that has a few different ways of being pronounced. In Ireland, it's Holland, but in the United States, I've heard it pronounced 3 different ways: Holland, Holland, and Holland. Personally, I think that Holland is the best pronunciation, because unlike Holland, it doesn't sound like a place in Europe, and it's nothing like Holstein, which is a type of cow. Another surname that's commonly mispronounced is Campbell. It's a classic case of Americans adding an I where there isn't one, perhaps because the Scottish name sounds a bit too close to Campbell. But Scottish people don't say Campbell when they meet someone called Campbell. They say Campbell. That's because the name comes from the Scottish Gaelic surname, Mac Campbell, which literally translates as, son of the crooked one. The first known bearer of the name was a 13th century Scottish warrior named Gilby Attain Mac Ada, who got his nickname because he had a hunchback. So, like Holland, the English spelling of Campbell evolved from the Scottish spelling of McCampbell, and it took on an extra I along the way. Now, whether or not you include that extra doesn't change the pronunciation, but it does have consequences. If you spell your last name Campbell, you're probably going to be asked to put your ring on the bell at school. On the other hand, choosing to spell it Campfield will probably earn you the nickname Campy. Finally, we have Zimbabwe, country located in southern Africa. If you thought it was pronounced Zimbabwe, well, you're not alone. That's what I thought until recently. But thanks to a comment made by a viewer, I learned that the correct pronunciation is actually Zimbabwe. This is an example of what linguists call the Wodak effect, which is the tendency of native English speakers to apply English rules to non-English words. In this case, the B in Zimbabwe is silent, but because English speakers are used to the letter B making a B sound at the beginning of words, they assume it must be pronounced Zimbabwe. In reality, though, the B in Zimbabwe is silent because the Shona people who live in Zimbabwe don't pronounce the B sound. Instead of Zimbabwe, they say Simbabwe, which literally translates as, we are the lion. Because the B is silent in the native language, the English spelling of Zimbabwe also has a silent B. Now, it's worth pointing out that the English spelling of Zimbabwe is technically inaccurate because it includes a Z, whereas the Shona spelling is MU Zimbabwe. But that's a story for another video. So there you have it, 3 words that are commonly mispronounced in English, one of which is a country and 2 of which are surnames. But this isn't the whole list, of course. I haven't even mentioned aluminum, nuclear, or assassinate. And there are plenty of other examples. In fact, a survey conducted by YouGov in 2019 found that the most commonly misspelled word in the English language is definitely. But you know what isn't commonly misspelled? Subscribing for more content. So be sure to do that, and I'll see you in the next video.